All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Tim Cooley. I'm the author of the Pitch Deck book and the executive director for Park City Angels. Joined with me today is Jeff Erickson. Jeff, why don't you tell a little bit of your background?
Yeah, I spent a few years at Carta and currently am with a startup called Forecaster that makes financial modeling easy for founders. I'm also an active angel investor and a startup advisor. So love the space and excited to hear this next pitch.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And one of the goals of this podcast really is, and I believe that everyone can get invested. So we really want to help people with that. So with that being said, Corey, why don't you, looks like you're already sharing your screen. Go ahead and start and pitch us.
Cool. So I like to start with the backdrop just of me as a personal founder, and then I'll jump into a snapshot of where we're heading and what we're building. And then I'll make a quick introduction to the team and that'll wrap up. So my past experience was as a software engineer, helping small to medium businesses get online. Decided to take that and move it into enterprise work, contracted with supply chain companies and medical companies, and just got my feet wet in software engineering, but got really passionate about the way that companies unlocked internal budgets for these development cycles. And it was then that I found that some of that capital was flowing outside the company into ventures. And that's how I got my feet wet, started with startups. And I saw those startups raise capital very quickly when they were interconnected or incubated by the corporate sponsors. They would get revenue accelerate up front. They would get huge amounts of lending up front. They would have like a sort of a quick path through the VCs. They would get angels coming all around them, and it felt very rigged to blow. And then all of a sudden, I'd watch them get acquired or plan for an SPAC or an IPO, and I'm like, wow, I'm on the wrong side of the table here. So it was then I decided, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go jump ship and start servicing those companies that were VC or private equity funded, and spent the better half of 3 years analyzing and getting my hands dirty with actually building the technology and sitting as a CTO for these startups. And so I use that position to say, hey, look, I'll get you from 0 to 1. We'll help you move capital across the line. We'll help you refine the MVP. We'll help you get into the market, acquire customers, and I'll be with you as basically a glorified co-founder with you. But this is your idea. This is your baby. And when you're ready to launch and take on more funding, go through seed and Series A, that's fine with me. I'll jump ship and move on to the next guy. And so I did that for 3 years. Did pretty well, but found a lot of holes where I was pulling and holding things together, and figured out, wait, why don't I just build a platform that does this instead of me doing it manually? That would make it scalable. It'd make the impact broader, and I could hit a global market instead of my little niche area of the globe. So I came up with Captal. Now, right at the end of that, and you'll see the team members at the end, is when I began. I decided to build this platform, and suddenly people came from out of the woodworks, and a lot of them had the same experience from a different angle. And when we put our brains together, we began to discover this beautiful map of the potential and the market that we could hit. So that's what Captal is. We found these 3 problems were key. Number one, there was too many platforms to raise capital on. There's too many ways to pitch. There's too many ways to acquire the capital, to hire the human capital, and to position the data so your company could grow and market appropriately, right? So the founders would spend 90% of their time applying through the same mechanisms to different VCs or different investment groups, applying to lenders, applying to beta testers, and trying to gather customers. And in the same, most of the R&D and data was always the same. And so we're like, hey, let's simplify that process. And the second problem was that there was no platforms that could consistently say, hey, you're trying to raise capital, but for what? And it was always data acquisition or talent acquisition. And we're like, well, why aren't they all on the same platform? It's the same mechanics, right? Onboarding people, onboarding capital, onboarding data. And so if we could build the pipelines to move those, we would be successful. And then the third premise from my experience in the Valley is that when I took my experience and tried to democratize it across the US and work with different companies, those companies weren't aware of all the different type of capital that's available and all the different tips and tricks, hacks, and IP that they could access to help accelerate the growth of their ventures. And so instead of educating founders, I was like, what if we just showed them? What if we were just like, here's the capital, here's the people, and here's the data. And so we began to construct a model. Here's the current state of affairs. This is where things were when we began doing this investigation. I've been through all of this. As CTO for different ventures, I've been through pitch and demo days, been through crowdfunding, been through funding accelerators. I've been through all these. I've seen alternative VC models. I've seen, different forums and different websites. There's different platforms. Everybody knows the pain point of trying to jump on LinkedIn to look at deal flow and being inundated with hundreds of messages of like, hey, here's my company, invest in me, here's what we're looking for. Right? There's no relationship building. It's very dry and very disparate. And so because of that, the capital that I was used to seeing accessed at the upper echelons of corporate venture remained relatively untouched and bottled up. And so we decided to build the pipelines like we had discussed and to move into a simple, more unified platform to bring it all together. And so that's where Captal came about. So from this platform, once we began to compile the set of features for MVP and what would be the easiest, simplest penetration into the market, the path of least resistance, we came up with this model. Instead of a general marketplace, we decided to build pipelines. And so this is what the future state and current state of what we're trying to build through Captal. And so data, dollars, and people can move from third-party platforms. They can move from all the current capital types. And now we can use that as leverage to go unlock the currently pent up capital that's available for ventures. And most of it is not equity-based. So most of it is revenue-based. It's extremely attractive. It's grant-based. It's capital that wants to see ventures win, right? And I'm like, well, why don't we marry that to the equity capital and align the whole industry, creating the operating system underneath it? So just like any operating system, you look at Rippling, you Grin, you look at the way Amazon's built their flywheel model. It boils down to three things: KYX, so just getting to know all the people involved, giving them a portal to access and contribute their part, the ability to transact and to move capital through conduits, and then with that, we are hoping to build enough revenue to build the world's first universal API for capital. So you go through Captal, you log in once, you tell us what your venture does, and then we stay with you through the full life cycle. And if we do our job right, then we're going to turn all the top founders into the best funders, long tail. And so with that, we're aiming to hit this $3.4 trillion market segment. And we say that because VC right now is about 329 billion in total market cap. But the pent up value from revenue, debt, municipal funding, and other capital that's pent up that can't move through ventures is bottlenecked right now. It doesn't have an operating system to access these deals. And so that's who we're trying to hit, is the full stack of capital that wants to move through ventures. And so these are our first principles. We believe that our founding team is most qualified to solve this problem because at our heart, at our core, we all believe and have agreed that venture solves the unsolvable. Big companies, no matter how much money they throw at it, how much mitigation how much lobbying they do, some stuff cannot be broken through unless it's seen from a different, smaller micro perspective that ventures have. So we believe ventures help solve that unsolvable problem suite. And then conduits move things faster. So marketplaces are more spray and pray. They're more ineffective. They sound good because it shows you a lot of visibility, and some of them are very pretty. But we want to be direct and laser focused when it comes to funding ventures. It's a very serious matter. And then we get to have fun. And that last point is that we believe abundance is contagious. And so the more we help founders sunset into those funder groups, the more they give back to the community and can keep that snowballing in perpetuity. So here's the founding team: Kurt Walker and I. He's our CEO. I've fused our experience. He's from the lending side. He's built super communities worldwide. And I felt he was the best fit for the job to help us unify all the people and to move the ball forward. And then Thomas, we brought on, he's ex-Palantir, ex-Tableau, ex-Looker, Tyson, Google, or Walmart. And so we felt he was best to run our product division. So that's it. That's the wrap up of our pitch.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Any questions, Jeff?
So, yeah, I mean, the first question is, what's the ask? I think we left that off, and then we'll get back to some of that on some of the feedback. But what's the ask? What?
Yeah.
Should
Should we include that in the pitch?
Yes, I would include, here's what we're asking for, here's what we are needing to get, and here's what it's going to do to help us get to the next level. Okay. So I think there's some of that would be helpful. So yeah, I can get into more of the stuff like that just through the feedback. But Tim, any questions you had?
Yeah, I think we'll address them in the feedback part because I actually have quite a few. But I think they're also going to be related more to areas of improvement than we'll get to both of them at the same time.
Cool.
Perfect. So, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. So Jeff, what did you like about the presentation? Okay.
So first off, Corey, you're just like a super likable guy. You present really well. You're well-versed and you come across with confidence and everything else. So you're the right guy to pitch for sure. I think some of the other things, I mean, I liked how you started out. So I'll put a caveat on this. I liked how you started out, kind of gave some background on yourself and, where you came from and all that stuff. It made it really personable. I do think as we get into maybe some of the critiques or some of the feedback is you might've spent too long on that before we got into the actual presentation. I think you could condense that and hit it just as well. Cause I mean, it comes across in some of that. And I would almost, and I'm diving into now the feedback, but,
cool.
But anyways, I can go there here in a minute. So yeah, why don't we go there, Tim? Maybe you can comment on some of the things that you liked.
A couple of things that I really like. I think you're charismatic. I think something people don't realize is one, you're not the CEO, and you are presenting this company. That is pretty common, actually. Sometimes the CEO, and this is for our broader audience, isn't the best at presenting, and it literally is okay to have someone else pitch the company. I would recommend, if that is the case, and this isn't a formal pitch, but if it were to have the CEO with you on the presentation. But again, this is we're just giving you feedback.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of feedback here, so we'll start with feedback.
Okay.
But so go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. All right. So first off, like I said, and I was getting into it, is that I think your introduction was a little long before we even moved anywhere into the presentation. I think it was like at least 2 minutes in, a lot of background about you and that I think you could condense that and just hit it with, hey, this is my background, software engineer. Here's what I've been doing, bam, bam, bam. Make it quick and simple and then jump into, okay, here's the problem that we see. And identifying the problem right up front. I know you had the three. When we got into the problem, there was kind of that three-pronged problem. And I don't think it was quite concise enough for me to say, okay, here's the real problem that we're trying to address. Venture capital is kind of broken and these are the reasons, but then it kind of got diluted a little bit, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was one piece of feedback. The other thing I'll say is after you got through the problem, and we were probably halfway through the presentation by the time we got into the problem and then the solution. As you got into the current model, it was this slide where you had all these arrows and everything everywhere. That was really confusing. I wasn't completely sure what all that meant. I saw like cap table here, the thing here. There were just lots of arrows, and I wasn't totally sure of even the purpose, unless it was all of this is super confusing and messy, and we're going to make it easier.
Yeah.
But that
I
wasn't.
think I forget that term. It's old world is what I was thinking of. So like that's old world. That's where I'm coming from, is there's all this dispersion and confusion, and it is a mess. Like I tried to show it, like, but I need to explicitly say this isn't what we're solving. This is the old world that we're trying to
This
resolve.
is what it looks like today. And I kind of got that, but I was also trying to figure out on that slide, I'm like, okay, this, what does this have to do with all these? You have all of these terms everywhere. Like I see cap table over here. I see this over here. I see, and I was just trying to follow it all. I'm going, I'm not quite sure what all this means. So,
well, that's the life of the founder. That's my point. It's like we looked at it and I'm like, holy crap, we have to know all this stuff. Like, this is insane.
And maybe that's the point, because that's what I didn't get that from, like, that was the point, if that makes sense. But I mean, if that's what you're trying to get across, I'd come out and say that, because it was, I mean, it got that point across, like, holy cow, this is overwhelming. I never want to start a company if this is what it is.
I think I like that. What I'll say is, like, hold up, full stop. If you're confused by this slide, just know every founder is as well. And that's what I'm trying to convey with it. I could just say, that's what I'm conveying with this slide.
Okay.
I love that.
So yes, I think that would actually be helpful. I just wasn't quite sure how that fit in there. The other thing, when you got to your, let's see, when you got into the different types of capital, I thought it'd be, the reason that I kind of knew a little bit more is because, Corey, you and I had talked before. So I knew a little bit what's going on. I would make it a little more clear about some of the different types of capital in there that are available that aren't getting tapped into. I know you alluded to it in, like, your TAM slide, right? Where the market's huge. But the reason it's so huge is because here's venture capital and here's the other pieces. The one thing that was a little confusing on that slide is that you had was it a $2.9 trillion, market, but then you had venture capital at 349 million or something. And then the other forms were like 129 million, and it didn't, or a billion, and it didn't add up to the trillion. And so I was like, wait, disconnect. And you can probably explain it, but it was a disconnect when I was just watching the slides, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I should put in a number to show that there's a difference, and it's not. So the bottom two numbers is, there's TAM, total addressable market, right, of the VC sector. We're not disrupting the VC sector. That's a $300 billion market, and we're not disrupting. Like in Q1 of last year, the reason why I'm showing that, or of this year, it's almost half. So last year's at 329 billion. By the end of this year, it's probably going to be in the 600 or 700 billion. So it's growing like exponentially.
It's growing
really fast.
Again, I think with whether it was the slide or the way it was kind of explained, I didn't catch that.
Okay.
Me either. I had no idea.
Yeah. And I was just like thinking, okay, this doesn't add up. That's a huge market, and I'm trying to figure out where that all adds up. So I think, just going back, just take that as some feedback in terms of that's not the message that came across that you were just sharing. So hopefully that's helpful. The last thing that I'll mention is, well, there's actually a couple things. The team slide, I think you've got a solid team. What I think was missing is that you just had, like, the pictures of you guys and your names and titles, but I wanted to know that, what your background was. I wanted to see some logos of the companies you had been at, where Kurt had been at, and those types of things. Like, give me some confidence that, this is the team that I'm investing in. Where's your background? Who am I? Who are these guys? What's represented by these pictures? Also, the slide was a little plain. Like, it's just, I think you could make that slide look a lot nicer with your pictures and all that stuff. And then the last two things were, I didn't see a competitor slide. So there was no competitive analysis out there. And just so you know, having no competitors is not an answer. It doesn't fly.
Right.
So who are you competing against? Even if it's, existing places, but some type of competitive slide and what sets you apart from everything else out there. That was missing. And then the other thing that was missing was the financials. What does this look like? What are your projections as we start to look out ahead? And where does this get? And then I guess the last thing, and I already asked at the beginning, what was the ask? I mean, we just went through this pitch. What do you need? And that ties a little bit in with your financials and your projections, and even maybe a timeline that says, here's what we've done so far. Here's what we're going to be doing. And this is why we need to raise money. I didn't get any of that. I was like, oh, we ended here. I'm not sure where to go here. I feel like we need to keep talking, a few more slides, if that makes sense.
Okay. Do you guys give these notes back in written form too?
No.
Okay.
Oh, you can watch the YouTube video.
Yeah, I'm trying to take a couple of notes. This is really
no
good.
worries.
Yeah. No, I'm not a self-promoter, but I would really recommend checking out my book. I think it would really help you.
I will second that. Yes.
Shameless plug. I love it.
Yeah. You're really missing a lot of information that's critical to the pitch itself. I would say you probably gave us a third of a pitch. And
in a 10-minute span. And so there's things I think you can cut down, but like Tim said, it was probably about a third of the information we needed.
Yeah. And just to go down my notes as well. So this is actually really common when people are really excited about their solution, is to wrap it up in theory. And I will say, like, there wasn't any, like Jeff mentioned, there wasn't a real hard problem that I could like relate to, I could grab onto. So the problem is more theoretical, like venture companies can't get funded. We're going to help that. And it's like, yes, that's a problem. Yes, we can look at the data, but like you have this whole 68% of funding that people aren't tapping into. That's a real problem. And I'm excited for that solution. Like if you said that there's this pool of capital that only a few people know how to get to, and we built a solution that can get to the 68, like all the traditional stuff we're not touching. But I'm like, first of all, as an entrepreneur, I'm like, I'm interested. And as a VC, you're like, I'm interested as well. Like, tell me more about this solution. The second part of that, and you can see how clear that problem is, right? Mm-hmm. The second part when you're doing this is, and this is for a lot of people, you didn't really explain the solution. Like, I really have no idea what you're doing. And so when you're, I get it conceptually, but like when you can show me the direct opposites, right? Like we built this platform. Here's how like a company signs up. This is why that part of it's different. Like if you can connect it really granularly, it also gets me to see like what you've built so far, or maybe your guys are in wireframe. I don't know, because you didn't tell us where you're at with the company. But those elements start letting me see how you're solving this critical problem that you solved. And I love your background because I actually have a very similar background. This space is very, very complicated. And the marketplace for these is actually like, there's lots of people trying to solve this. We talked about Carta earlier. Like, how are you going to beat Carta when they have a really clean marketplace, or Gust, or DLM is growing really, really quickly right now? Like, how are you going to be different from those players? And like locally in Utah, we have a couple of people who are trying very similar things. And so I would have loved to see like really what's different right now. And so, yeah, spend a little bit more time clearly on the problem would help with the solution and get us super stoked. Because like I said, that 68% is very appealing. Yeah. The second thing you did, or there's lots of things in here, and it's a good thing to look at, is I'm not sure where your market numbers came from. Usually we can kind of figure it out, but because you had no revenue model, it's really difficult to say like we charge $50 a month and we sell to venture capital people, or we sell to entrepreneurs. And I wasn't really sure how to relate those numbers to one another.
So you would say add revenue model into the deck?
100%. Yeah,
for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say like problem solution revenue model, like that quickly, because in my brain, I'm like, well, how much did they charge for this thing? Right. Like we don't want to wait for that answer.
Yep. So
And
do you
then
know like the what do you guys think about the old world, new world type proposition rather than problem solution? You know how Rippling, that's why I mentioned Rippling and Grin, because they
Yeah.
had the similar problem because they're OSs. And so they fit, they're a different standard model than kind of like problem solution, because they're more like integrate everybody and then lift that ship and then begin to roll down the line like a flywheel. That's kind of how Amazon did the same thing, because they're like a thin membrane layer. Like, and so when you talk about competition, I went through this practice and I struggled with it because I was like, either we have 15,000 competitors or we have like no one, and no one sounds bad, but saying market saturation with all the competitors is also bad. And so like everyone I looked at, I'm like, well, they would integrate. It was like a very the closest one I could think of, and I won't say them here, but we can maybe talk offline, but I have a couple of competitors that even them, I was like, we would end up working together. I don't see us as competition, even out of Utah. So
I think
I've got to
that's
figure out.
so
Yeah.
that is the problem, right? So for example, like there is no real open API to Gust right now, right? There's no real open API to PitchBook. You know, those things, there might be. Carta probably doesn't have an open API to their backend data. So, so that what you're saying is like, here's the three problems. We really want these platforms to be connected and they're not. So we're going to make that happen. There's this untapped resource of capital that people just don't know about. So we're going to give you access to that and this, right? So, and then you can show, just like I said, you know, DLM doesn't have this, Carta doesn't have this. Like you can kind of bucket those providers into like different things. Like Assure has their own platform, but they're trying to connect venture as well. You know, so you can kind of bucket it that way. That's a really clean way if you're trying to kind of enter into an ecosystem where there's many competitors in very niche areas. It's a way to do a competitor slide.
Yeah, I like that point, Tim, where you're saying you could point out what, you know, different companies are not doing that you guys are going to be doing. And just having that, when you got into the, you know, example of Rippling and others, I don't know that I totally caught that, you know, that what the relevance was there. And maybe that was just my bad, but when you came back and explained it, it made more sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
That's good.
And then the other thing, this is just nitpicking. I mean,
I
your
love
team slide, we know your some of your team members I know, and so that's helpful, but not always the case, right? The blue hue on their faces really wasn't helpful, and it looked really weird. Like
Okay.
I would just remove that. That's a very nitpicking thing. And yeah, the ask slide is so critical. And to believe it or not, we get quite a few people who don't put an ask slide on. It's more than people think, and it's way more than it should be because you're literally asking for capital. It's like you went through this whole sales pitch and it didn't go like, but would you buy my product? And you're like, cool, well, thanks for wasting my time. So I have no idea what you're asking for, but
Sure.
I think, like I said, I think you've got the bases here. Your background is super impressive. And like, honestly, sometimes we question people who can build stuff. And I have no doubt that you can build the technology that can do whatever you were trying to do based off the pitch. I just don't know what that is or who needs it.
Oh, that comes across again, Corey. I mean, the way you pitch and present yourself and all that stuff, that comes across with confidence. And the benefit you have there is that ultimately at this early stage, your investors are going to be betting on you as an individual, right? But I think you've got to give them a plan that you're going to execute on and say, this is what we're going to do. Here are the milestones that we're going to hit by this date. And with your money, which is X amount that you're going to give us based on these terms, this is what we're going to accomplish. And so I think you have to paint that picture for your investors.
Okay. Cool. Love
Cool.
that.
All right. So based off of what we saw today, Jeff, would this be a company you would take into due diligence?
Okay, so based on the pitch deck and the presentation, I think it was missing enough details that probably wouldn't take them into the next stage. I think it needs a lot of work to go back and redo this. Again, this is like your trial to get feedback on, but I think there's a lot to work on to get us to that point to where I'd have the confidence to say to my investment committee, hey, let's take a hard look at this and dive into the details that a lot of those details were just missing. So I would say no, not yet.
Yeah, I agree. Like we'd had a great conversation and a lot of errors that many people make. But again, based off of what we saw today, not knowing you and other things outside of that, I would have to say no as well. But I think you got a good place to start from. And I would love to see a follow-up if I was actually screening this deal. But you'd have to fix those things.
Yeah, it'd come back in a few months here, and maybe you've made a little bit of traction as well over that period of time, but keep us on your radar, something like that.
Yeah. And one thing to keep in mind for those out there pitching is this is actually pretty common where you come in, you're a little bit too early, maybe. And then, if you come back 6 months, 12 months later, most groups are really excited to meet with you because you've probably made some serious traction. So keep plugging.
All right.
Well, great. Well, thanks for presenting. And just in closing, please, if you guys are looking for help with pitching, please, reach out to us. And if you're looking for support in financial, look at Forecaster. It's a really great tool. And then please come pitch us.